that they believed in things they couldn't see.
Right. But just think about, on any given Sunday, how many other groups are meeting all over. So on any given Sunday, there's thousands of churches. And if I look back, last week there were churches, the week before there were churches, 100 years ago there were churches. And so there is this kind of teaching that has guided churches for centuries, right? So it's not, so when they look at things, is there something that deviates from that? And so there is this kind of, and for some people that's, they say, then that proves that, it's all been kind of mass, the psychology of the masses has kind of directed this, but in a lot of cases, it can also be seen as the reverse of that, is that you have kind of, I can go to other countries, and they'll be teaching the same thing, when it comes to a Christian church and it's Bible-based. It's like, so there is this, we have a history of what that looks like.
It's consistent.
So, yeah, we know that compassion is a value, mercy is a value.
But why wouldn't you attribute that to tradition?
Well, I mean, that is in some ways, that is a way of saying tradition.
Okay.
Is that there is a tradition that goes along with that, and they looked at that as an agreement with Scripture as well. Okay. So did that kind of also conform to that tradition? Or is something just kind of like just jump out of left field all of a sudden and we bring that back in? But there was this, it's widespread usage, it conforms to tradition, and that it was from first-hand owners or first-hand viewers. And that's really kind of the criteria that they used a lot when they went through and determined which books kind of made it into the Bible.
Well, wasn't at the time there was a lot of false prophets coming out, and so it's basically isn't the conformity of what the apostles taught, because what Jesus taught and then what the apostles taught, and they just made it, and there seems to be widespread usage of that. Exactly. Is that kind of what it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So now with that, we'll wrap it up here. One thing that I'd always like to point out is if you look on page 28, there's always some things that I like to highlight for people to look in kind of deeper. There's some passages in the back that you can look at. And then it always gives some other activities that a person can do, and they're kind of time-based. So if a person has 10 minutes, go to the startingpointbible.com, and that's where those articles are. So people can look up those. There's sometimes it'll recommend a movie to watch or other books that they may want to read. And then what I'll always do is then hit the storyline of chapter 2, or there's always the kind of like what are the key points. Because even like what as we were kind of talking through things, and we're kind of skipping through because of the time, what I always tried to do was to bring it back to the two key points from this passage, and we would just kind of like, what I'll do is reiterate it at the end. It's like the primary way that God reveals himself to us today is through Scripture. So that's kind of, some of the things that we talked about, and that the Bible is both historically reliable and relevant to our lives. So I may have missed a lot of other things that were in there, but those were like the two key points that we wanted to hit during this time.
And when you wrap up at the end of this, you are actually for the first time in that session drawing a conclusion. And people may not agree with me on this, but my belief is that once the facilitator draws a conclusion, pretty much all discussion is coming to an end. Okay, you've just drawn a conclusion for us for the primary way God reveals himself to us today is through Scripture. And at this point, you're actually saying to the group, are we all tracking with that? Are we in agreement? Do we have people disagreeing? You want to draw people out at this point as you're wrapping it up. How does everybody feel about that? Anybody in contention with the fact that the primary way that God reveals to himself today is through Scripture? All right, cool. And then the Bible is both historically reliable and relevant to our lives. Are we all believing that? So that's how you're wrapping it up every week. You're really hitting those 2 points hard. While we're, for the first time in chapter 2, this is not exactly how your sessions are gonna go. Russ is really digging deep to really show you some of the background of this stuff. You will, as you go into your groups, you're gonna have a lot more group discussion, a lot more people talking, it's gonna be a lot more lively. And you're not gonna be drawing many conclusions during that time. You're not gonna be saying, oh, and so therefore this is true. That's not your position until you get to this very last page. So that's where you're drawing your conclusions. And then you're gonna have somebody read. You're gonna do almost another reading. You're not gonna read the Bible, you're not gonna read have other people participate. Remember that for some people, this will be the very, very first time they've ever been in a group talking out loud about anything related to God or the Bible. That's a big deal. That's a big deal, and you don't want to overlook that fact. In this group, we're such a different group of people, but when your groups come together in a few weeks, some of those people are going to be shy little Susies, you know? So have other people read. And so we're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap this one up.
And what I would do is go through and highlight some of the passages in the conversation guide, and maybe have people read. The first one, this one is sometimes a little bit tough. But you guys, it may be different. Like, I don't know if at your tables you already know all the people at your tables. I don't know if you've already got a little bit of a relationship, but see, a lot of times when we're starting these, it's like the first time we've ever really are talking with everyone. So this one's always a little bit of, you don't want to overload with information.
Right.
You don't also want to set a tone. Like, I'm a little bit careful, and I may have, I don't know if I overdid it, but, I may bring a handout, but I just tried to bring the most graphical ones that I had with it. Was just a chart, just so that I could, like, I'm a person, I don't necessarily have to talk through it and we have to say, okay, look at each one of these, but you want to give people enough meat that they understand that there's more to it. Like, they don't have to accept the Bible as just like, hey, we said it's true and that's it. But that actually, I think this is, maybe it was the first time for some of you of like even thinking about where some of the things came from, and that there was a whole process behind how it all came together. And it is, so.
I have a question along those lines. Do you think, and this is probably more for you, Maggie, than Russ, do you think that the women coming to the women's Bible study may approach some of this slightly differently than people who've signed up for Starting Point with the real purpose of exploring their faith? Where women coming to Bible study,
Are coming to study the Bible?
yeah, well, are generally oriented slightly differently. I mean, I don't know it, but when you were talking, I was just thinking.
Well, I think I'm gonna answer that question, then you can, I'm gonna say this about that. Having done it myself probably 10 times, 12 times, I'm learning something brand new based on what people are saying each and every time. Because as I find out where you're at in your journey, where I'm finding out where you are, it's helping me really understand how to talk to people in a different way who are exploring their faith. That doesn't really answer your question, but it kind of gives you an idea.
What I'm
that's
thinking
what-
is maybe would the women in Bible study have slightly different questions? Maybe that's more to where my thinking is.
And there may be a different, like, one of the things I can see this going is that you may have people may approach it from the standpoint is, I've got people around me that have these questions.
Exactly.
So I want to be able to,
Yeah.
Okay.
so there may be, it may take on a little bit different feel. Like, and that's what I don't know. Like, if we were here, like, even I could kind of get a sense as we were talking, you're thinking of how would I explain this to somebody, or you may know somebody that's got, like, right now they've got questions about this and they've made this comment. So you may have people that are kind of thinking it from that end.
I think though too that I think we're going to address signing people up for this a little differently. I'm guessing Minnie's gonna mention that in the next week or two, that this is gonna be a little bit more of an outreach for us than a normal Bible study would be. Normally our Bible studies are drawn from the church body, and I think here we're gonna be looking to our neighborhoods a little bit more and looking to our work and whatever. Hey, you and I have talked about God a few times, why don't you come to this Starting Point thing I'm doing? It's gonna be a little bit more of that, so you're gonna be in a little different audience, I think, this time than you will be in Ladies Bible Study. And I'm just going to talk to you for 2 seconds as we wrap up about how to organize yourself in preparation for your weekly thing. This is one thing that I did. I would just write chapter 3, and I'd write, okay, I'd write this little 7 over here, which meant 7 minutes, life story. If I had one person sharing, and this really helped me. I would just jot this down on a pad of paper before I got there. 5 minutes, because I'll discuss the overview of the CD. This is more in reference to your very first question, an hour and a half ago.
It's more like an agenda.
It's my little agenda for the day.
Yeah, I did.
And this really, and I check it off as I go, and I have my little timer and my little stopwatch with me that helps me.
Yeah.
And that just keeps me organized, because what you'll find, and boy, oh boy, I don't care how many times you do this. In fact, the more times you do starting point, the more disorganized you can get. Because you think you know what you're doing, and then you go, man, we've gone through the whole thing, and we're still on the same question. I don't know if that's happened to you, but it's happened to Bob and I. Bob and I sometimes scratch, Bob Jones, we're scratching our heads walking away going, what happened? And it's usually me, I get off on some tangent. I just want to also bring you back to a couple of things in the book on page 16, just in case people bring these up. On page 16, on the left-hand side, the third bullet point down, visit HTTP, rendering artist. That's not working any longer, so I would just cross that one off.
Oh,
See what I'm talking about, page 16 right here?
yes.
I want to get rid of references that are no longer valid. This book has been around for a while. The other thing that I do, if you want to just take a look up here, I take all my leader notes and I tape them into my book.
Oh, good idea.
That way I'm not going from my agenda to the leader note to the book, and I don't need like 4 feet of table space to organize myself. So I just put everything and I highlight everything accordingly, so I can just zip through seamlessly. People have no idea I'm looking at leader notes. You know, I've cut and pasted everything. It's the Martha Stewart solution to starting point. So my page look a lot like this. You have so
So she has a
many
teacher's
white
book.
spaces in this book that you can afford to do this. And again, I told you any Bible verses, I've printed them out, BibleGateway.com, I just go and print them out. I usually print them out in the NIV or the NLT. You know, that seems to be pretty safe. Sometimes I'll print them out in the Message, and if somebody reads NLT, I'll read the Message version just because it's so cool. Tensions, if you ever do Starting Point with Steve Diekman, you'll find out that the only reason Starting Point exists is for the tension in the story. That's all he cares about. Oh, I hope he watches this video. But if we go through a starting point, we haven't spent 15 or 20 minutes on tension in the story, watch out. So where I get my little list from is from the leader's notes. I just compile my own little thing. I cut up the leader's notes, I put them in here. Everything's easy. I want you to know that the very, very worst starting point you can do is still going to be the best for somebody else. And I say that just you take a breath as we go into chapter 3 through 10. There's really nothing you can do wrong except what I just did with you earlier when you were talking about Kirk Cameron and that. I said, oh, that awful guy was on that show. Yeah, don't do that. Don't say that awful guy.
No judgment, criticism.
You know, that's a bad thing to model when you're facilitating.
But I always look at the those last 2 points, and then say, okay, if I can think of, at least I just want to hit, like talk about the supporting things for whatever those points are.
Right.
That's to me how I kind of like try to organize myself around
What's
it.
the last 2 points?
Well, there's at the end of each chapter, you'll see this.
Yes.
You'll see where it's right after continuing the story. It'll say what the storyline is.
Yeah, storyline.
So like in I think it's usually always like the 2 points, and
It's
just
always, yeah, it is.
kind of like always finish with those, and I at least try to make sure that we've covered those 2.
I have a question about that. Are you opening it up?